Queen breaks through big in the US and comes roaring into the 80s with their 8th album, The Game. Are you ready to play? Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, the most fun place. If you like music and movies, we have a blast here, Eric, every week.
Yes,
right?
we do. Oh, sure.
Lots of fun.
Yeah.
If you're new to our podcast, thanks for checking us out. Hopefully, this is the one that hooks you in, that we reel you in. If not, hey, that's okay. Go check out some other stuff too. There's plenty of other episodes you could check out. But I guarantee you'll find something that you like. And if you're into the video versions, we're right now on YouTube as well. So you can hit the like and subscribe button there. This way you get notified of when new episodes drop. So we've got the audio covered. We got the video covered. I guess we have to start writing novels next. We have to start transcribing our episodes, Eric, into short novellas.
Maybe a Broadway musical.
There you
Broadway
go.
musical, graphic novel of us.
Yeah, graphic novel. Maybe a little Braille. Maybe we'll translate it into Braille, sign language, right? Yeah.
Or like what did Wolverine say in Logan? He's like, most of this didn't even happen, or 3/4 of it didn't happen this way anyway. So we can make our own legend. We can make our own graphic novel. So.
There you go.
Either way, we've got a lot of great content. Thanks for coming and joining us for this episode. Pull up a chair. We're going to have a great, fun conversation. We got a couple of guests here as well. Everybody is in perfect tonality. We have balanced everybody's microphones perfectly, I may say. First up, Mr. Robert Prisament making his triumphant return from his last scene on the Abbey Road episode. Welcome aboard, Rob. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
What's
Great
new
to be here.
What's new and exciting?
New exciting. I am raising money for MS. I have a big fundraiser. I had a big poker game for it last week, and going to raise around $30,000 this year.
Yeah, if you go to our Facebook page, I pinned Robert's link for his fundraising donation website. That's pinned to the top of our group, so you can, if you want to help out and donate, highly suggest you do. It's a great cause, and he's a great guy.
Oh, he is a great guy. How much did you raise so far, Rob?
This year, in total, I've raised about $150,000 or $60,000 in the past few years.
How about this year?
This year, I'm up to $15,000 so far.
Oh, yeah. You're halfway there.
So,
yeah.
It's a worthy cause. Yeah. So definitely
amazing.
hit us up on our Facebook group page, and you'll see the link there. And you know what, Rob? I'll actually put a link in the show notes as well. This way people can go right from Spotify, wherever they're listening to, and click the direct link to if they want to donate, which would be a great thing.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Mr. Christopher Clark.
Hey.
How are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
What's new and exciting with you?
I don't have to go to work tomorrow, so that's new and
That's a good. You know what?
I get to sleep tomorrow.
That's probably the most exciting news.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Not having to go to work tomorrow.
Oh, so, yep.
And I figured, you know what? Since we recently, as of the publishing of this episode, we recently had an eclipse. I figured I'd celebrate with a blue moon.
Oh,
I see.
Right? And I think that's an apropos beverage to celebrate the alignment of the sun and the moon all in one. Right, Eric? It's
yeah. Did you guys catch it or what? I mean, did you see it? No.
Yeah. We did it with my I teach down in the Bronx, and we during our professional development, we were all the teachers are out in the football field looking up with glasses, checking it out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, we had glasses at work, so we kind of took turns going outside.
Going out.
Yeah, we got about, I think in Maryland, I think we got 80% of it. So
nice.
I got to see, it was really cool. Yeah. So
yeah, I actually stayed in. I did not go out. I stayed in until it was over, and then I went outside. So So we've got a blue moon to celebrate the eclipse, and we've got a great album that we're talking about. This one, let's get right into the stats where we lay out some factual information for you. This way, we like to besides the opinion and the fun stuff, give you some factual stuff that you could take with you. And if you are going to work tomorrow, unlike Chris, you can wow your friends with some of this stuff. So this was released in June of 1980, produced by Queen and Mac, also known as Reinhold Mac, sorry. But he's known more, popularly as just Mac. He's an engineer, he's a producer. And Rob, there's your first bell for Jeff Lynne. He's as we said in our episode about the works, he's engineered extensively for ELO in the 70s. Not producing, but engineering. But for Queen, he assumed a producer role. There was a bunch of singles released from this album. There was 3 of them. Crazy Little Thing Called Love hit number 1. Play the Game hit number 42. And then they bounced back with Another One Bites the Dust hit number 1. So there's 2 number 1s sandwiched in between one that just didn't do anything, which is kind of strange. Usually when you kind of get on a roll, you're able to capitalize it. But, 2 number 1s out of 3 ain't bad. And it's hit number 1 on Billboard. And it went 4 times platinum. So that's in excess of 4 million stateside, but over 12 million worldwide. So this was big. But this was their breakthrough U.S., Queen had been popular throughout the 70s in Europe and kind of building an audience, and of course in their home country of the UK. Some success in the US. Bohemian Rhapsody and of course We Are the Champions, and those songs were hitting, and but this one pushed them right through, and it was a worldwide success as well. So let's go with the young one, the grasshopper of the group. What is your connection to this album?
Well, honestly, for me, I got into Queen. I was a kid when Wayne's World came out and was really big. Mm-hmm. And I remember Freddie Mercury dying, and they're having the concert for life and all that stuff. And that's really where I first discovered Queen. But where I really got into this album more than anything else, like most of my experience with Queen is like the 70s records, and A Night at the Opera was an amazing album that I checked out because of Bohemian Rhapsody. But I really got into Queen, the game, because of the live record, Queen Rock Montreal, and just the performance of the songs from the game on that concert were just incredible. And from there, I went back and I checked out the record into a little bit more depth than I had before, and it top to bottom. I mean, it's wherever the needle falls. It's a really great record. So,
and one of the interesting things about Queen live is, despite the fact that their 70s stuff was very lush or very, like Bohemian Rhapsody, they were able to translate that into the live show. With just the 4 of them, they didn't really take extra people out on the road. And it translated really well, Chris.
And it's really, what's interesting is, especially from that show, is like it's a lot more raw and a little bit more stripped down. So like if you hear the game on that, I would make the argument that after you listen to this record, go check out the game tracks from Rock Montreal, because they're more stripped down. You're more, Freddie Mercury's voice isn't with all the extra background vocals. Just him is just in of itself amazing. And there's a rawness and almost in some songs, almost like a punky edge. Like they open up with the fast version of We Will Rock You, which is almost like a punk song. So it's like definitely another side of Queen. Like they were able to like separate what they did on stage from what they did in the studio in the best of ways.
Yeah, able to adapt it and translate it without necessarily having to feel like they had to be faithful. Exactly. To what they put down on the album, especially in the 70s when again it was all that lush, and just the stuff they were doing.
I'd also like to recommend, if you do want to check out the Montreal 82 show, the full show is on YouTube, the video, so you can watch that as well as listen to it, and it's just mind-boggling to watch them at their peak.
For the 3 of us, the balance of the panel, Eric, Rob, and I, we were all in just entering high school at that point. I can say from my own experience, I was not into Queen like I am now or would get into, but I certainly remember Another One Bites the Dust. When that hit, it hit huge, Rob, right? Do you remember like that around that time? I mean, that thing just exploded.
It was everywhere. You couldn't avoid the song. It was everywhere you walked. People were singing it, and and it just had starting off with that bass line was iconic.
Yeah, just Eric. I mean, it hit you. It hit in the prog. Some fans got angry at Queen in the '80s because it seemingly walked away from whatever prog/metal hybrid they were a part of.
Well, I didn't, I didn't really listen to Queen then. This was my gateway album. This was the album that I got first on vinyl. It was actually a gift from my brother. Just bought it for me for my birthday. Just figured I'd like it, and I did. So it was amazing. It was good stuff, but I didn't know that they had made necessarily that big transition into the 80s yet. I mean, I knew Bohemian Rhapsody and, We Will Rock You, but wasn't all that familiar with their older stuff yet. So after this, though, now you look back on it, it's like, wow, this album's definitely of its time. Yeah. So yeah, very, very 80s. But yeah, Chris, you had something.
No, I was going to say, because Dean mentioned that whole thing with the prog. When I was going and doing a little bit of background research just to get familiarize myself with some of the history of the record, I found a link to a message board for prog rock people ranking the Queen albums.
Mm-hmm. They hate it.
They loathe it. I think they gave it like 2.5 stars at the most. I was shocked, and the whole thing is just them thrashing this album, and I'm like, wow, you just like want nothing to do with anything that isn't prog. It was really, really funny.
Yeah, hot take coming in. Prog people are very protective of like that style of music, and if you start to color outside the lines,
wow, it's crazy.
You may as well pack up and go home. I was looking at the same message board, and it's like 2 stars, 1 star. It's like, all right. It's like, this is not prog. It's like, no, it is not, and you kind of have to, and. Let's. I'm going to put for those on YouTube watching. Here's the album cover. This is decidedly not a prog-looking group.
No,
these guys are all dressed in leather, kind of tough biker look.
Yeah. Judas Priest-like almost.
A little bit, definitely. Even different from the way Queen was, and I think that's a part of this conversation. Is what Queen and Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury was in a metamorphosis, and it kind of goes back to the album before Jazz, right? Where he had cut his hair. He was kind of wearing shorter hair. He started kind of wearing the leather stuff, starting to change the image from the long hair and those ornate costumes and kind of honing down his image. And then when we catch up to them in the 80s, he had really, by the time they started making the music videos, like Play the Game is the first music video with him with the mustache and the really short hair and kind of like, and he looks a little weird because he's got bangs. He still didn't figure it out. And then when you watch Another One Bites the Dust video, he's become like the strutting, really, not that he wasn't confident before, but it's a Freddie Mercury that is kind of in command.
The bright colored spandex wasn't as commanding.
Yeah. Although he did wear that in the 80s still a little bit, but yeah, he had kind of reimagined himself and come on the other side as more of an adult figure, but really kind of a true frontman as opposed to someone who was dressed really strangely or, like flamboyantly. Is kind of like, well, now he's kind of in frontman mode, and I think that's the difference. And I dare say that with Jazz and then the Game, he actually starts to sound different too. He starts to sing different. He starts to lean into vocalizations, Eric, right? Kind of not that, he had a certain balladeer, even when they were singing the heavy stuff, he had a certain tone to his voice. But once we start getting to the 80s, there's that's why I like the 80s Freddie Mercury voice, because it has a little bit.
There's always that. I think we talked about this on the Works episode where he started smoking as a, just to kind of change his voice and to make it a little bit rougher, a little, when it needed to be. He still had that beautiful voice when it applied, but on several songs on this album, he's trying to go for that sort of like 50s style, almost Elvis Presley, trying to emote that kind of like cadence to the voice and the pitch, and his voice is decidedly deeper on certain tracks and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. It's really, I think this whole album is interesting in the sense that it's more of an experiment. I think that's how Brian May saw it. But I definitely, it's very eclectic. Yeah, I think on that front.
Yeah.
So, but yep.
Rob?
I think I wanted to chime in going back to high school, and that I don't think I was. I mean, I was a Queen fan with the songs I knew, but I wasn't like a diehard or had all their albums. And one thing that I remember very well, I'm not sure if you guys do, but a good friend of ours and of mine at the time, Kenny Rosenberg, he
Shout out to Kenny.
Shout out to Kenny. Won a radio contest by being caller number 25 to get tickets to the jazz show
Really?
at Madison Square Garden, and backstage got to meet the
Did
band.
not know that. Wow.
And he got a black satin Queen tour jacket that I used to wear when I was at his house.
Wow.
And that was kind of some sort of my introduction to them. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
You know?
Nothing but stories. Nothing but stories. High school days, man. That's what it's all about.
We were all, and it's funny. The three of us, none of us were really into Queen at that time. Like I said, I bought the 45 of Another One Bites the Dust, or Crazy Little Thing Called Love, because it had Don't Try Suicide on the flip side. And I absolutely remember that.
Yeah.
But as far as getting into the band, not really. For me, it wasn't until The Works came out that I kind of dove in, and Mr. Bad Guy, Freddie Mercury's solo album, all that stuff happened around the same time.
Yeah.
So for this, this was like the hits, like Eric said, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, channeling, Freddie channeling Elvis, writing that song on a guitar, because he had said, admittedly, I can't really play the guitar. So only knowing a few rudimentary chords really had me have to focus in on writing and doing something. And you hear him literally channeling Elvis, Chris.
He channeled Elvis so much that I remember going back to that Montreal concert. There was a Thanksgiving at my brother-in-law's house where I was watching that concert with my wife's uncle. And then slowly but surely, everybody in the family came in and we all watched it from beginning to end. And when it got to Crazy Little Thing Called Love, my mother-in-law insisted that it was Elvis. And we had this fight about, no, it's not an Elvis cover. Yes, it is. No, it's not. And then the next
she thought it was an Elvis.
She thought it was an Elvis cover. Song. And then she wasn't the only one. There was a few people in the family that kept arguing. I'm like, don't argue with me this. I know this is right. And then the next song in the set was, I think, Jailhouse Rock or like some other Elvis. I don't, like, see, it's an Elvis. I said, it's not. But so, I mean, Freddie must have done a good job channeling Elvis, because people, I think, thought it was an Elvis cover.
And then doing Jailhouse Rock must have hurt your credibility.
It did a little bit. I had to go. I went up and Googled it. I went up and Googled
it. But my mom used to be. She was like, Elvis was her boy. But when groups like Queen and like Robert Plant did the Honey Drippers thing, and she used to love that old timey going back to that kind of stuff. So she became instant fans of the guys we were listening to because of that, So, but I just thought it was cool. It was just different. It was just, something new, something challenging. I think the 80s was like that for everyone. They were everybody had to change. But this album, I mean, going back and listening to some of these tracks, though, it's like a couple of them are maybe a little too 80s for my taste.
Really?
Yeah. We'll get to that.
I fell right into this album, and even more so, like I wrote down, this album just takes off. Like the first side is like they're just ripping through, they're tearing through songs, and then the second side kind of slows down a little bit. And you said, Eric, that the 80s were a little bit of a time of change, and that's exactly what happened here. Yeah. Queen had largely used Roy Thomas Baker and some other producers in the 70s. This was the first album that they partnered with Mac, and Mac has a very different style of recording. And he really had to sell Queen on it. Queen was very meticulous. They're like Bohemian Rhapsody. They're stacking vocals, and they were of the mind, well, if we made a mistake, we got to start over, scratch the whole thing and start over again. And Mac is like, no, you don't need to do that. We can punch in. We can roll it up to where the mistake happened and punch it in. And he really had to sell them and show them that this is how we can do it. And once they bought into it, that kind of opened up a whole new world for them. And they really kind of, I'm going to guess it allows them to work faster too, because you don't have to go back and redo, like they were used to redoing the whole thing if there was a mistake.
Yeah.
And with technology and the way Mac approached recordings, like, no, you can punch in. We'll roll it up to the mistake. Boom. We start it up, hit record, and then you guys go right into it. You pick up the tempo and go. So that really, I think kind of hopefully I'm thinking energized Queen a little bit more, especially when they were undertaking this kind of more popish sound, because that's what this is. If we're going to talk about the prog people, like Christopher said, Chris said walking away from Queen in turning their back on them, much like they probably did with Genesis and everybody else that had a hit. Like once you got a hit, you're out of the group. Right. Prog is you're not allowed to have hits in Prague. Once yes, Owner of the Lonely Heart, you're out. They just kept booting people out in the 80s.
Your membership is revoked.
your Prague privileges have been revoked. Can't come to the convention. But what they did though is a lot of people talk about like Another One Bites the Dust. They kind of compare it more to disco. In listening to this album and listening to Dragon Attack and some of the other stuff, it's more funk.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
It's a very, very bass-driven album.
Oh, yeah. John Deacon gets the award.
Oh, he's a monster.
For this album. Yeah, John Deacon, even Dragon Attack, which you would think that like, it's got some really great bass stuff, so he must have wrote it. No, Brian May wrote Dragon Attack, and John Deacon is the benefactor of it, though, because he just lays, like, right from the beginning, just lays the funk down and really brings that groove in. And yeah, but I think the three of us, Eric and Rob, remember at the time it was more kind of disco was still a thing, and it was still kind of waning. So it's easy to make that comparison. Oh, this is very disco-y, but it reads funk to me, Eric.
I agree. But then again, I think we mentioned this as well on the what was it, the soul hits of the 70s, that we were kind of talking about that there's that fine line between disco and soul, and there was a lot of funky tunes that people were listening to in the discotheques and things like that. So this song definitely was hitting the club circuit there. People were already like mashing it up with like, I think it was a Beat It. I heard a mashup with, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it just, the funk factor definitely most likely, because of the bass. There's just no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, like side one, Play the Game, Dragon Attack, Another One Bites the Dust, Need Your Loving Tonight, and Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Those songs just kind of go and like Dragon Attack and Another One Bites the Dust almost run. There's barely any pause in between those two. There is a millisecond before it starts. So these songs are just kind of going right through. And like I said, and then the second side, you've got they pump the brakes a little bit, bring the tempo down, but still great thing. The great thing about Queen, Rob, is that they're a four-tool group. They've got four songwriters, right? They've all written hits, and that's the thing.
Sing.
They all sing. Well, Deacon not as much, but
yeah.
But they all write. Like John Deacon wrote Another One Bites the Dust. He wrote You're My Best Friend. He wrote some of their bigger hits. Roger Taylor. Brian May, Fat Bottom Girls. So they all have the ability to write hits, and Freddie is able just to take this stuff and make it sound like it's all his.
Yeah.
So I want to give my 2 cents on this album, and then let you guys tear it apart.
Even give us a nickel. Don't
tear it apart.
Let's step at 2 cents.
Not tear tear my view apart.
Okay. Oh no.
In my eyes, being a big Queen fan throughout their career, this album was both a pinnacle for me and the end of a part of their sound. From after the game, they lost me. They got kind of like when Rush started bringing in synthesizers too much. They kind of lost me when some of their songs and the videos with Freddie in a dress, I'm like, it's not just the rockin' band anymore. Now, I think all their albums after this each have a really good rockin' song on them. I mean, Hammer to Fall, One Vision, those can ride with the best of them. But the albums in total don't work for me. And I know you were just talking about, the works, and go back on that and tell me, or Hot Space.
I'll take it from there then. They may have lost you, but they picked me up. I'll put it that way. Like I love the 80s output of Queen. I just think as a band, they became more refined. They kind of honed in on a sound. I like the later Freddie Mercury's voice. Also, I like his, again, his more, just like I tend to like later Elvis. A lot of people like Elvis when he was younger. I like the more mature Elvis voice because it had some meat behind it. And I think Freddie had the same thing in the 80s. He really kind of came into who he was, comfortable with it, and able to he really understood his tool and was able to really rip into it. So I totally get a lot of people. This is like a demarcation point of, like I said, some people said, this ain't for me. And then a lot of people like, wow, okay, this is Queen. This is something neat. Chris, where do you fall on that?
I was going to say I'm in the same camp as Rob. Like I came to Queen in the early 90s.
Get out of here.
I'm in the same. I came to Queen in the early 90s, but the spot I went back to is like it made me go find Night at the Opera. So that was kind of like my entry point. And then I had a copy of News of the World, and so those were the things that really kind of drew me into Queen. And then really my favorite record is jazz. Like after I stopped listening to only Fat Bottom Girls and listened to the rest of that album, there's a lot of cool stuff going on, like experimenting with things like dance hall and, old big band type of stuff and, all the stacked vocals. And, even on jazz, you have a lot of Middle Eastern and Arabian type of vibes going on. Like, and as good as Queen in the 80s is, and there are some really brilliant moments, as Rob said, on all those records, I feel like they weren't quite as experimental. They just kind of leaned into the 80s and that 80s sound. And then that was kind of where they lived. Whereas in the 70s, I feel like they were a little bit more adventurous, which is why I kind of gravitate more towards that stuff, because I like stuff that's kind of, messing with all those different elements and trying to bring them into the sound.
Eric, where do you land on that?
I'm with you, Dean. I prefer the 80s Queen because I guess maybe just because I just wasn't a huge fan of the 70s stuff all that much. I was more into prog rock. For me back in the day was more instrumental. It was more, Pink Floyd and long-winded solos and things like Yes and Genesis going off. And, the hard rock guitar, I don't equate it half as much with prog as I do the keyboard and drums and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, Queen was a different animal. The voices, I get what you're saying, Chris. I like the idea that there's both, that you can go back there and hear something different. And there's something a little, when you're not in the mood for that, you got the 80s stuff, which for me was like, he also became very cinematic, right? They started doing soundtrack work, and then, so that played a big role in it too. The movies that we saw at the time, you kind of combine that Highlander, Flash Gordon. I mean, two campy, ridiculous movies, but there's, they added something to those films, and I just feel like that was part of our story, our soundtrack there, but. To go back and, Chris, I do agree that they probably were more adventurous, but then so was Genesis. So was Yes. So was,
I stopped listening to Genesis after Duke too.
Yeah. So
wow. Hard cut off. Rob, what do you got, Rob?
So
I just realized something that skews my opinion of their catalog. Is it an album that I had and wore to death, and I'm not sure where I got it actually, was their greatest hits album, which was just the 70s Queen. And I just played that to death. And that's the Queen that to me was Queen. And then Radio Gaga and I Want to Break Free came out, and they just didn't work for me.
Yeah. There's no denying that their output in the 70s was something different. It was more ambitious. It was bravado. It was kind of really pushing the boundaries and
it was anthem
and mixing genres. Like you said, they weren't afraid to try anything, but and like most bands do, you kind of start to settle in. You start to kind of hone things in and where the game fits into that is it's that transitional, but I think it's almost like a hard stop. I mean, the album before was kind of leading up to this. It wasn't that far afield, I don't think. I think it had the best of both worlds because you had Fat Bottom Girls and Bicycle Racing. You had Mustafa, which was kind of like that experimental stuff, but then you had good old fashioned Loverboy, right? And Let Me Entertain You and Don't Stop Me Now. And that's kind of got more in common with the game. I think that, I think they were kind of heading towards this. And then once they got here, and then I think partnering with Mac, I think also changed things as well. I think when you get a different producer, you're getting a different look, a different way of doing things. And that might, and again, what was popular at the time, this funky disco-y music, and they were adapting it, and they would take it to the nth degree with the next album. So they were also absorbing what was going on in music at the time, right? And then putting it through the Queen grinder, and then here's what you're getting, So I think they were kind of, in the 70s, kind of their own thing, and then they took their thing and then started incorporating what they were hearing going on, because this album, I think for me, this is an easy listen. I put this thing on. I don't have to worry about anything. There's no skipping.
There's no skipping.
There's nothing on this. Even
I disagree.
Even Prime Jive. Well, even Roger Taylor's not my favorite vocalist. He's a little shrill.
Yeah.
What? Don't Try Suicide, Eric. What's this? What's the skip?
Need Your Loving Tonight. That sounds like a 38 Special song to me. That is
wow.
Really?
That's one of my favorite ones.
That's not Queen to me at all. It's so poppy. That's my least favorite song, probably by them.
That was John Deacon. He wrote Another One Bites the Dust, man.
Yeah.
You gotta give him a pass.
Yeah, but it's Another One Bites. At least it's got a groove. At least it's got something to it. But that song just screams 80s. It's just so
absolutely.
So
Save Me is I think one of the best Queen songs ever.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Ending up
to me, that's more like their old stuff. Now they're getting back to that sort of anthem, sort of like the chorus comes in and that kind of Save Me, Sail Away, Sweet Sister. It has those feelers out. It's kind of reaching back. I think the second side kind of evokes that for me towards the end of it,
Yeah, Chris, I would say that the second side is probably a little more eclectic then, right? I think that's what we're getting at is the first side is really just kind of like straight ahead, kind of pedal to the metal, kind of moving through these songs. And then I think the second side kind of gives you some different looks.
Yeah, Don't Try Suicide kind of still has a little bit of that, old-timey sound that they did in the 70s, but Rocket actually to me reminded me of the Cars, like that vibe, like with some of the that Oberheim sounds underneath it sounds like something you would have heard on a Cars record.
But I think that speaks to them kind of again. I'm
not saying
absorbing what's going on.
Cool.
I think it speaks to them kind of absorbing what was going on as well.
Yeah. The one that I would skip honestly is Crazy Little Thing Called Love. That's the one I think. I don't know, man. I can't. I don't know why. It's my least.
That's because you got yelled at. You got yelled at because everyone thought it was Elvis, and you said no. You're associating a bad memory with it.
No,
we need to cleanse you of that.
I think it's just played out, and I don't know. I think it's just like a lame attempt. It's a cheesy attempt at 50s music. I don't know.
I get you. There were several critics who said as much. I think at the time because one critic said that they were leaning into something. They kind of know what they're going for, but they're not doing it enough. Like they're not, they're not loose enough or something to that effect. Like they weren't like really giving themselves over to doing an actual sort of 50s type of song. And there might be some truth to that. And I get what you're saying. And it is way overplayed. But at this point, but it's like, but when you go back and when you actually listen to it it's a different experience. I feel when you listen to an album, as opposed to hearing it every day on the radio or you know what I mean? Like it's sometimes you have to kind of force yourself to do that. I think I had to do that coming into this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, Rob. Before I kick it over to you, I want to add to what Eric just said. In listening to the album, and because it's like the Crazy Little Thing Called Love is because it's halfway in, I think it's kind of it actually kind of took me by surprise because it's kind of, you're hearing these songs, then all of a sudden in the middle of the album, you hear Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And I think Eric hit the nail on the head. In the context of the album, it fits. Yeah, if you're gonna say let's listen to a Queen song, Crazy Little, you'd be like, nah, I don't want to listen to it. But when you're listening to this album and it comes on after Need Your Loving Tonight, and I think it works. I think for me, it's kind of like, oh shit, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Like I like where it is on the album because you kind of almost forget about it when you're rolling through all these other songs. So, yeah. Rob, what do you got?
I kind of agree with Chris on this one, where personally I can skip that song on the album. And I think if they obviously have the roots like that, since they play Elvis covers live and other covers live, if they should have done what a lot of bands do and make a full album of songs that sound like they're from the 50s. Maybe throw a couple of, covers in there. So many bands do, a blues album or a jazz album or something like that. Instead of trying to sneak it in there, it's like, here's 3.5 minutes of 50s and then back to our regularly scheduled show.
Well, had Freddie Mercury lived, they might have explored that, right? Because that's become popular relatively recently, the Great American Songbook, and I want to go back and record the songs that I grew up with and that kind of thing,
But didn't he do that with his solo record? I mean, there was some covers on there. I remember, right? No.
No, his solo record was all originals.
Didn't he do The Great Pretender?
They like
he did a cover of The Great Pretender, which was a single.
Yeah,
that was kind of stuff that he was working. Yeah, so he definitely is steeped in that kind of material. But I like an artist taking a crack at it and saying, well, here's my version, and it's good, so it works. If it didn't hit number one, we could maybe scratch our head and say, what was this doing on here? But
let's look at it this way. Do you think they kind of more or less sort of almost paved the way for bands like Stray Cats and things like that? I could kind of see that.
Yeah,
an interesting point.
Taking root, rockabilly. Yeah, let's do that. Like that. Queen made it cool. The biggest hit. I mean, it's
Yeah,
I find like what Chris was saying about this song. It's the song off The Works that doesn't quite work for me, because it's like I feel like he's just trying to do Crazy Little Thing called, I forget what's the name of the song, Dean? That's on The Works. You know what I'm talking about?
You're putting me on the spot.
So your version of the album is
I'll look it up. Hang on.
But it's a very similar track, and given the Works to me is a little bit heavier. You got stuff like Hammer to Fall, even like but it's got going back to that
Man on the Prowl.
Man on the Prowl, yeah,
that was
so. They're kind of leaning back into the full chorus thing again on a lot of the songs, sort of returning to form just a bit, but still staying main, streamlining everything, but. That song kind of stands out and just felt like, oh, it's just, Crazy Little Thing Called Love again. He's just trying to do that again. But then again, you got the song from Highlander, right? What's the song they would listen to in the bar, right? That sort of slow, like soul type thing that he's,
1 Year of Love.
1 Year of Love, which is, again, not them, but yet I don't know why, but I dig that song.
Yeah,
Freddie's voice in that song is just so emotive.
That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, when you've got a vocalist, I mean, I don't think we can deny that Freddie has the ability to handle this kind of stuff. So even if it might, it may not, to quote a Queen track, it may not have staying power in your opinion, but he can certainly. Freddie is adept enough, and that's what I love about this album too. Is that he started to sing things a little differently. Like let's take Crazy Little Thing Called Love. It's very whispery. Yeah, he's kind of impersonating Elvis, but it's also a very kind of whispery vocal. He's not doing the Freddie vocal acrobatics and really being forceful with his voice like he can. And I think, and then like who mentioned Save Me?
I did.
And then you get something bombastic like that, like in that's kind of an arena style ballad song. Written by Brian May. Brian May actually wrote that about Freddie. because Freddie had gone through a breakup with his partner, and Brian May was trying to imagine. He goes, because he was distraught. And he goes, he said, I tried to put myself in that headspace, tried to imagine what he might have been feeling. And when you listen, and when you go back and listen to those lyrics, it's kind of very poignant. That Brian wrote it about Freddie, and then Freddie had to sing it. And it's very, it's just one of those. That's why I think this album gives you everything, and I think if you start to nitpick and pull things out, then you can start pulling other things out too. And I think if you take it as a collection, warts and all, it's got the rockabilly, but it's got Save Me, and it's got Sail Away Sweet Sister, which, Brian May has a really good voice. I think he's a really, he's a little more tender, his voice, but he can certainly carry a tune, Rob.
I think it's interesting, and I just thought of this, and it really goes for Queen in general, not just this album specifically, is that so many other artists name them as one of their top influences, but you never see Queen covers out there.
Who's going to try? Who would dare try?
I mean, the only one I know is
that.
The only one I know is Metallica doing Stone Cold Crazy, which is friggin' amazing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I can't think of any Queen covers offhand.
Except like Chris has one, maybe.
The band Dream Theater on when they did the record Black Clouds and Silver Linings, they released a whole bunch of covers as singles, and they did from Sheer Heart Attack, Flick of the Wrist, Tenement Funster, like that whole suite of songs. They recorded and released it. But you're also talking about a band of virtuosos, so it kind of speaks to the fact that Queen is very hard to do and do well. That it took a band of people that went to like Berklee School of Music and Juilliard to cover that kind of stuff. So
Chris, if I'm not mistaken, Dream Theater is a pop. They're a pop band.
They're a prog metal band.
Oh, they're a prog band. Oh, they're a prog band.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Now it kind of makes sense.
A band that I need to listen to a lot more of their stuff, by the way. And I think you kind of, I mean, the later stuff, when people say prog is dead, there's a lot of stuff out there that's just...
Spock's Beard is another one that's an amazing, more not modern. They came out in the 90s, but Spock's Beard is another great prog band from a later period.
Named after a great television character.
in his evil mode when he's got the beard.
That's right. That's Mirror. The episode Mirror. Hey, listen, if you're going to check us, we're going to come ready.
It's a hell of a lot better than Tapao. Remember that the 80s?
Yeah,
and the Tapao.
That song Heart and Soul.
Yeah,
hey, I remember. Oh, no, all right. Let's get back. Let's get back on track, because otherwise we're going to go way. Right?
Yep. There you go.
Yeah, one of the things I enjoy, like I said, about Queen, is that you've got four songwriters, and outside of the Beatles and a handful of other bands, you don't have that many players. You don't have that many composers in a group. Usually it's one or two, or there's a partnership. Jagger and Richards. You usually Townsend and Daltrey. Usually and then some of the other guys will write stuff. But these guys spread it out pretty evenly. I mean, Freddie's got he wrote 3 songs. Brian May wrote 3. Deacon and Taylor get 2 each. And I think that's they've always been very democratic. And I think it was when the album, I think it was when The Miracle came out, is when they just started crediting everything to Queen instead of doing individual, because they just kind of, we all write the stuff anyway. We all help contribute. So we'll just call all songs by Queen because they're just that good. That's one of the things about this group that I love. And of course, nobody's got a guitar sound like Brian May, Rob.
Yeah.
I mean, the Red Special is kind of like, he built that when he was a kid, that guitar. And it's become, very, like it's one of those, he's probably, I would put him, Rob, I'll ask you. I'll ask the 3 of you. Yeah, I ask everybody. Why just single out Rob? Brian May's guitar sound in the top 5 most recognizable in rock and roll.
100%.
Maybe even would I dare say top 3? I mean, he's got a very specific sound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Rob? Yeah.
Absolutely. And his use of delay in a lot of songs. You can hear, which influenced Nuno Bettencourt quite a lot, who
Okay.
also has a distinct sound.
Yeah, Chris.
And I was going to say, it's the fact that he's using a guitar that literally nobody else has, because
That's
he
true.
built it himself in high school with his dad. The amplifier he uses is a Vox. Most people are using Marshalls and Fenders, and then his guitar pick is a sixpence. He doesn't use a regular guitar pick; he uses a sixpence piece.
And he's an astrophysicist too.
Yep.
What the hell you want from this guy? I mean, Jesus,
Kind of like Tom Schultz, right, from Boston.
Yeah.
Same.
A funny little bit of trivia in the video for Play the Game, which is on YouTube. He's playing a Strat, because there is a part of the video they had to shoot it backwards, where Freddie has Brian's guitar and he throws it at Brian, and Brian catches it and plays it, and they actually shot that in reverse. And Brian May did not want his Red Special to be thrown, because God forbid there's a miss, that thing's going to be a pile of matchsticks, right? So much to his consternation, he's like, all right, give me the, we'll use the Telecaster. I don't really play that, but since we're going to be throwing a guitar around, we may as well just use something that I don't care if I miss or it gets messed up. So watch the video for the game. You'll see they shot it backwards. So actually Freddie, and you could tell that it was done in reverse, but he throws it at Brian, and Brian catches it and then plays the solo. So it
sounds like it was directed by Christopher Nolan.
It's Memento meets Queen, and Queen's. You know what? And with this album, Queen, there was what 1, 2, 3 videos, 4 videos. There were 4 videos from this album, so they started to embrace that the visual aspects of music as well. They were kind of on the cut, And Rob said, "Oh, he's in the dress, like I want to break free." But that kind of put them, they weren't they kind of realized that that image was important, or to get those the visuals out in front of people. And as early as this album, they had 4. It was Save Me, Another One Bites the Dust, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and Play the Game. So they had worked up 4 videos already, and this would be and Play the Game. Oddly enough, another piece of trivia, is the first appearance of Freddie's mustache. So that was, he had shaved it, he had never had a mustache. And then, and if you look at the cover of the game, he doesn't have a mustache. But then when they started making the videos, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, you could tell when they were shot, he didn't have a mustache. But then in the game, he has a mustache, and Another One Bites the Dust, he has a mustache. So,
wow, you get a cozy.
For that. I'll give one to myself.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Even the cover evokes it's pre-MTV, so we're talking about. It looks like a music video. Like I mean, that really looks straight. I mean, this is before MTV was born. How many music videos look like that? Right, that black and white, that gloss, that that cinematography there.
Badass. They're 4 badasses ready to fight. Although I don't know if John Deacon is going to take anybody. I
see a lot of influence there. Even though you may not be a fan of the music, but I think they're influencing something new. There's something, there's somebody's going to pick up on this. The prog fans they're going to have their say, and that's the thing. But like I said before, I like the fact that there's a little bit of both, that you can kind of back and forth. If you're not in the mood for something heavy and proggy, you got something lighter, you got something fun, you got this album definitely works on that level, I feel.
And I backed into this album. I was into the Works first as far as getting into Queen, and probably A Kind of Magic, and then kind of went back to the game, because I know Eric always loved the game. He would always talk about the game. Like that was his, like he was always talking about the game, and I was kind of had leapfrogged that into the Works. And then when I went back, I'm like, this is just like, geez, it's just more of the same. It's fantastic for me. Again, this was my landscape, the '80s, so it fit perfectly with my sensibilities and the stuff that I was listening to. Now, before we started recording, Rob had made a bold statement, or he made a statement that kind of has me thinking. He said that there's going to be the Jeff Lynne bell showing up, and I'm the only one that's rung it so far. He said it's going to come. It's going to come.
I thought it was an ELO bell. I didn't realize it was a.
Well, okay, it's an ELO bell too. So what do you have that's going to prompt the bell to be rung?
Well, you already pretty much did it with is Mac's involvement with ELO.
That's right. That's right. And actually, a lot of people compared Queen and ELO around this time. They kind of, about both, because both of them had those prog roots, and they both pivoted towards something more poppy. Mm-hmm. So there is some tracking. There is some tracking there for some of these bands as well. That kind of we call it an evolution, though. I don't know that it's. I don't think these things were done on purpose. I think these bands naturally evolve towards these things, right? And for better or for worse. But Genesis, they've all done it. Like it's very few that haven't. Right? We talked about Rush, and Rob, you said, when Rush went with the synthesizers, I kind of walked away. It seems like it's an inevitability in the progression of your, for Rush, they said, hey, we want to be a little more accessible. We want to get the same Rush thing, but in 3 minutes instead of 6 minutes. So there was some, kind of doing it on purpose, but some other ones just kind of evolved that way. Chris,
I was gonna say, it's interesting because, like, you think about like a band like Rush or a band like Queen, like The Game is an amazing record, and that's the first record where they start to bring keyboards and elements of the 80s in, but it's like touches. It's like, they trim down the songs, they trim the fat a little bit, they brought in a little bit of that Oberheim keyboard, but it's not like overt. And as the records progressed, that's when they kind of, and the same thing with Rush, you had Signals where they really started to use the keyboards in a little bit more of a prominent way. But then after you get past Grace Under Pressure and into those like 3 or 4 records in the late 80s, that's where people start to fall off because it almost becomes overkill. Yeah. Well, it worked a little bit, so maybe it'll work a lot. Like, and I think to a degree for some people who kind of fall off with Queen, I think that happened as well, is that as amazing as The Game is, the little touches became almost too much in certain spots for some people. And that's where people started to get off the bus a little bit with Queen past The Game.
All right. Let's stop right here. And we're gonna roll into our new segment, 3 Lies and a Truth. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I have 4 statements in front of me. Okay, 3 of them are lies. 1 of them is real. I'm gonna read the 4 statements, and then we'll go we'll go around, and you guys have to tell me which one is true. Okay, you ready for this, Rob? You ready, Chris?
Yeah.
Eric is ready. He's been waiting. Eric is 1 for 1. We've done this twice so far. First time I got him. Second time he got me. So I have to think. I have to try and outthink Eric also when I'm doing these. I kind of like, all right, well and now I know Chris is, I know Chris was going to be on this episode, so I had to do some thinking as well. So here we go. I'm going to read 4 statements. We'll go around. You don't have to shout them out, and then you let me know I need to know what is the true statement, not what is the lie. So here we go. 3 lies and a truth. Here it comes. A. Another One Bites the Dust was used as a temp track for Rocky IV before Survivor recorded Burning Heart. B. Although Queen claims that The Game is the first album to use synthesizers, Bicycle Race actually used a synthesizer to recreate the bicycle bells. C. Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling album ever in the UK. D. John Deacon's bass line for Another One Bites the Dust was inspired by the Chic song Les Freaks. I'll read them one more time. Another One Bites the Dust was used as a temp track for Rocky IV before Survivor recorded Burning Heart. B. Bicycle Race actually used a synthesizer to create the bicycle bells for that song. C. Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling album ever in the UK. D. John Deacon's bass line for Another One Bites the Dust was inspired by the Chic song Les Freaks. Let's go with Mr. We'll leave Eric for last. Let's go with Mr. Rob Prisman. What do you got out of those 4 statements? Which one's true?
I will say C.
C. You think that Queen's Greatest Hits is their biggest selling album ever in the UK?
I would think so.
Okay. Out of every album, that's the biggest selling one. Okay, so you've got C. Christopher Clark, what do you got?
I would say C as well.
C as well. Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling album ever in the UK. Eric, what's it going to be?
Going to go with D.
Going to go with D. John Deacon's bass line for Another One Bites the Dust was inspired by the Chic song Les Freaks.
I almost went with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, here we go. 3 lies and a truth. First lie. Another One Bites the Dust was used as a temp track for Rocky IV before Burning Heart. It was actually used for Rocky III. Sylvester Stallone wanted to, he asked to use it. They sent it over. They were gonna, but then they went with Eye of the Tiger instead. So that's a lie.
Interesting.
B. Bicycle Race actually used a synthesizer to create their bicycle bells. That is not true. This album proudly was the first album of the game that they used synthesizers on. All the other albums they would actually put in the liner notes, no synthesizers used ever. And that turned off a lot of people too. Like, oh, now they're using synthesizers. So we've got two of our guests say Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling album ever in the UK. Eric says John Deacon's bass line for Another One Bites the Dust was inspired by the Chic song "Like Freak." Only one of these is true. One of them is a lie.
The tension's building.
I'm waiting. I'm working it. I'm working it like pizza dough. The lie is John Deacon's bass line for Another One Bites the Dust was inspired by the Chic song "Good Times." Not Lay Freak.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
He was hanging out with Chic in the studio, and Bernard Edwards and
Nile Rodgers.
Nile Rodgers, sorry, brain freeze, and Nile Rodgers, and if you listen to Good Times, he's got the bass line. The true statement: Queen's Greatest Hits is the biggest selling album ever in the UK. It is the number one album of all time in the UK. Sold a ton. Nothing's even close. So congratulations, Rob and Chris.
We move on to the bonus round.
That was the bonus round. Is you get to come back. You get a koozie.
Oh, okay.
You get to come back you get to come back for an episode. So. Thank you guys for playing 3 Lies and a Truth. We're gonna continue trying to stump these gentlemen or whoever our panelists are, male, female, or alien or otherwise. We will continue to try and stump them.
Those are fun.
All right, yeah. All right, let's as we wind down, we talked about songs that I think everyone talked about songs that they didn't care for. Why don't we go around, Rob? What's the stuff that you really dig on this album? What kind of pulls you out of saying, well, this isn't the Queen that I know?
Save Me and Sail Away, Sweet Sister are big high points for me.
Both written by Brian May, ironically enough.
Yeah. And Guns N' Roses used to do a little tag of Sail Away, Sweet Sister in their shows.
Yeah.
Another person who idolized Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. And ELO.
Any excuse. Any excuse.
Well, I mean, if you're going to bring up Guns N' Roses, I have to bring up that Axl Rose wanted Jeff Lynne to produce November Rain, but he wasn't around.
I did not know that. That's something I today years old when I knew that, learned that.
Well, listen to November Rain and you're like, oh, okay. I get it. It sounds like it. So Chris, while you have the floor, what do you like on this album? What do you dig?
To me, Play the Game is probably easily in my top 5 Queen songs. I really do like Sail Away, Sweet Sister and Save Me, like Rob. And another one that kind of stuck out to me, and I know it's not one of Eric's favorites, was Need Your Lovin' Tonight. Kind of caught my ear. I don't know why, but I really do dig that song. I like the riff on it.
Chris, don't be afraid to say it if you.
I'm sorry. No, to me, there's just the song, like it, as you pointed out earlier, just, or somebody pointed out that there wasn't enough. There's not enough to it. There's you don't hear that virtuosic stuff, or even just a little bit on this song. To me, it sounds like a pop. If I didn't know this was Queen, I would think it was somebody else. In all honesty, because it just has that really
actually
pop.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was driving around with my girlfriend, and we were playing this, and that song came on, and she's like, "Who is this?"
Yeah,
and I said, "It's Queen." I said, "It's Queen." Yeah, that's very. It's odd you should mention that. So, Eric, what do you? We don't have to worry about Need Your Lovin' tonight, obviously.
I do like Play the Game, of course. I love. It's just a great opening track, and I love Dragon Attack. That was always the one for me because it kind of reminds me. Doesn't sound like, but the structure of it, where it really kind of builds up to that chorus at the end, like Hammer to Fall. Right. And just like it, it has that big sort of crescendo, and I love the way that, the chorus kicks in and then it just keeps going and it's just louder. And, so I love that. So yeah, those are my 2 favorite tracks off the album. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the last third of the album I feel is also very strong,
Yeah.
So,
it's hard. I think you kind of either dig the second side more or you dig the first side more. I think because they hit different. I think they hit differently. just because of the way the songs are. And maybe it has to do with the composers too. You got Roger Taylor has 2 songs on side 2, Brian May has 2 songs on side 2, and Freddie Mercury has 1. And on the first side, it's Freddie Mercury and John Deacon mainly. So that could go towards, that could say something about actually preferring songwriters, right?
Yeah.
And what, or maybe just the way these songs are approached. I have to go with Play the Game as well. I just love.
Yep.
It seemed like if this was, like Eric said, it's the opening track, and it seems like this is like Freddie on a different level.
Mm-hmm.
It's got great guitar work. It's got everything in it, but John Deacon's bass is in there too. He's just plucking away. I think it's got everything for probably emblematic of the feel of what the 80s of what Queen in the 80s would be like. I think Play the Game is probably most emblematic. I mean, yeah, there's other things, but like that's probably a good here's what the sound was going to be. Because it still has the Brian May guitar sound to it, and it's got all those different things to it. Save Me. His Freddie's vocal on Save Me is just it'll rip your heart out. And again, and once you know the story behind it, it's even more just melancholy or bittersweet or something to it that Brian May wrote that for him. And it just wasn't written about some detached person. Sail Away, Sweet Sister. Brian May's, like I said, has got a good voice. I'm going to go with Crazy Little Thing Called Love. I'm going to throw a third one in there. I got it because I love I'm a pop guy. I mean, that's just the way it is, It's got a great catchy hook to it. That acoustic guitar, I mean, that's just a great hook. It's a very simple hook. It's a D chord, but it's very simple. But it's a throwback. But at the time, there, back then, there, it was that you didn't really hear that stuff going on, especially and what it did is it opened up Queen to a whole audience too. So I'll take them throwing their hat into the pop ring to give them a number 1 album in the U.S. and to really expose the American audience, which they had trouble getting to expose the American audience to this, and they responded. They responded with 4 million copies and number 1. So, I don't mind it. It's a pop ditty. It's catchy. It doesn't ever get grating. It might get played out, but it never gets annoying. Some songs like you can hear too much, like, it's just like True. It doesn't age. Crazy Little Thing Called Love. You might hear it all the time on oldies, but it still holds up. It's still a great, well-constructed, catchy. Brian May's solo is very tasty in that track as well. It's just a really nice, quick, tasty solo. So it's fun, so it's got, Ready Freddie. I mean, what else do you want? Right? What else do you want? Are you ready for Freddie? We're ready for Freddie.
That might be the best part of the song is the guitar, because it's decidedly not Brian May's sound.
Yeah.
Right? It's an old sort of jazz guitar. It sounds like an old, Gibson or something. And I love that. I love that he, kind of switched.
It's fun. Yeah. They had their tongue planted firmly in their cheek. They weren't trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes that this was something original. Chris, what do you got?
To Eric's point.
I changed your mind, right? No, you're coming in to say Crazy. I knew it, Chris. I knew you were going to come in. No. I knew you were going to say Crazy Little Thing Called Love. I had a feeling that this was what was going to happen.
Definitely not going to happen. But what I was going to say is, to Eric's point, it's one of the only songs where he's not using the red special. He actually plays the solo on a Telecaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, in the music video, he does. Does he play? Does he play it on the album too?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
It sounds like that. I mean, it
Yeah, and that the Telecaster is the sound of rockabilly. It's the sound of twangy country. So, that's the guitar you want to use. So, closing thoughts, Rob. What do you got as we close out the game? As we end the game, we finish playing the game.
As we end the game, I just say it's a great piece of an amazing band's discography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And deserves all the respect that it gets. And I'll give you credit for Crazy Little Thing Called Love, that since it did provide such a cornerstone of this album and open them up to such a new audience, I'll let it be there.
Good.
I'll approve it.
Queen thanks you.
Rob gets the approval.
Rob Prisman stamp of approval. I got one. Chris, am I gonna win you over too? Let's get that stamp of approval. Let's get that stamp of approval.
I can understand.
Just close your eyes and say it. Just close your eyes and say it.
I understand why people like it. It's just it's not for. I don't know. That's where I get off for some reason. But the rest of the record, I definitely think it's an essential album. As a whole, I definitely think, like you said, even though it's not one of my favorite tracks, it fits within the whole, and the whole is definitely one of their classic records, and it's definitely something somebody should listen to. And I think there's something for everybody, regardless of where you fall into Queen, whether it's in the 70s or the 80s, and they kind of fits for everybody there, as far as I'm concerned. So
cool. How about this, Chris? We've had a couple of albums that are like this that Eric and I have talked about.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those albums that you can go backwards with, or you can go forwards with.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Right? Like this is one of those albums that you can start with and say, oh, okay, I think I want to go forward. Yeah. And you say, well, you know what? I think I want to go backwards, and either one will fit. If you go to jazz before, behind this, there's enough there, and then jazz will take you to the one, I think this is a good, even though it's not in the middle of their discography, I think it's in the middle of their sound. I think it's the combination. It's the ending of one and the beginning of another.
Let me ask you, what do you think of Hot Space though? Like, does it fit? Like, if you go from the Game, because the Hot Space is the next record, does it like fit? Does Hot Space fit after the Game?
I was actually listening to some of it. It's not as disco-y as everybody would say. I mean, it's got some of the disco elements to it. But I was listening, I forgot, I was listening to one song today and it was all guitar, so I'm like, I may need to reassess this album.
I've heard people say it suffers from a poor track listing. Like the sequencing makes it kind of weak. Like if there are Queen fans that have resequenced it and say it's better if it's better resequenced. You can actually find playlists with the resequenced Hot Space playlist on Spotify.
Yeah, maybe that. And they did. I mean, Under Pressure is on Hot Space, so for no other reason, it's kind of like
worth the price of admission.
Might be worth the price of admission. So, Eric, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think Queen as a whole, whether you like the new stuff, the 80s stuff, whatever, but I think it's a testament to a band that stuck together. Mm. It's a testament to the art of collaboration, and whatever they did, whatever worked, whatever didn't work, they did it together, and that's their legacy. I think, it's a tremendous legacy. It's such a great band.
Yeah,
and it's a tragedy when Freddie was gone. I mean, we were I remember.
Yeah. Oh,
you and I, Dean, like because we watched like music videos, and Dean would be, you were like, Freddie's not looking too good. Yeah. And sure enough, I mean, it wasn't revealed right away. So, but that was. I
remember looking when the video for "I Want It All" for the Miracle came out. I'm like, he does not. There's something that was going on, and they were still a couple of years away from even mentioning anything. But one of the great things about Queen too is you didn't hear about the internal squabbles, you didn't hear about fist fights, you didn't hear about swinging fists, guitars. They did have some confidence issues around the time of Live Aid, and Live Aid, the response they got kind of gave them a second wind. But this is a group of four guys, and John Deacon retired. Once Freddie died, he's like that. I think it affected him the most. He became a recluse. You don't really see him. He doesn't appear anywhere. He just became like a regular guy again. Four great musicians, four great songwriters, all in one band that has made music that, like I said, Eric said it perfect. There's something for everyone in here. Mm-hmm. You want stuff that's hard. Even they used to get kind of compared to Zeppelin in their early days. So go with the early stuff. Sheer Heart Attack, Queen 2. And like I said, like bands do though, they age, they mature, and they change. Zeppelin did it, right? By the time we got to In Through the Outdoor, that was a different Zeppelin than Zeppelin 2, right? And either you go along with the trip, or you get off. Some people get off the bus and say, okay, that's it for me. But that's the journey that the band is on.
AC/DC did it. Every album sounds totally different.
AC/DC, like I said, we're really going to try and use a fourth chord. We're really going to try and use a fourth chord on this album. Let's, Angus, give us a fourth chord. And then I can't do it. I can't do it. All right, just let's continue recording then. Just go with the three chords that we have.
Yeah.
They're probably the only band. Them and Motorhead might be the only bands that have never changed ever. If there are other bands that never changed, let us know. Hit us up on social media. You can leave a comment. Where do you think Queen falls? What's your favorite Queen album? What do you like, the earlier stuff? You like the later stuff? Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram. Leave a comment in the YouTube comments too. We reply to the comments. We love interacting with our audience, so please go ahead and do that. Mr. Christopher Clark, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So we don't want to keep you up too late. I know you want to sleep in tomorrow because you said you were off. But
actually, I just remember I have to drive my daughter to school. So,
we're going to keep you up even longer then. Mr. Robert Prismant with those dulcet, silver-throated tones. Thank you so much for joining us, Rob.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Again, we're going to put a link to Rob's fundraiser in the show notes. So if you want to help donate towards his fundraising for MS, go ahead and do that. I do it every year. So if you want to be like me, go ahead and donate and help out. If you don't want to be like me, do it anyway.
Be like Dean.
And help. Yeah, be like me. Be like me.
Help Rob, we love you.
Yeah.
God bless you. Yep.
Rob's the man. Like I said way back, Rob gave me a Jimi Hendrix. He gave me Are You Experienced? He dubbed it. And that was my first exposure to Jimi Hendrix. And he doesn't remember that, but I remember it. See, it's what you remember in life.
Your introduction into piracy.
Yes, that was it too. Way before Napster, there was Prismant. And of course, Eric and I will be sitting in our seats waiting for you until we have our very next episode. But until then, hit us up on the socials. We'll see you there. And for Chris, for Rob, and of course for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will definitely catch you on side 2.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Cooper. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.